if I want to minimize the risk and to maximize the return, I need to avoid the adventures. I need to avoid uncertainty. I need to eliminate areas that have a bad reputation, or it's really, really hard to get growth.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested.
Hi, freedom fighters. As we start a new year and a new decade, I always find that it's a great time to reflect on the past, learn from it, and then plan what we'll do to optimise our opportunities in the future. So that's exactly what we're going to do on the next two-part special episodes of Get Invested. Today's episode will focus on what has happened in property nationally over the last couple of years and what lessons we've gleaned from it. Next week's episode will focus on the future. What's in store in the year ahead, from the macro down to the micro level? What impact will this have on property in Australia? And where should you invest if you're looking for sustainable success? And to help shed some light on this subject, there's no one better qualified or better positioned than today's special guest, Doron Peleg. For those of you who've been listening to Get Invested for some time now, you'll remember Doron from episode 24, where he opened our eyes to successful property investment principles and benefits of his absolutely unique forward-projecting research from his company Riskwise. If you hadn't had to listen to this episode, then it's a great listen, so go and check it out. Now, as the CEO founder of Riskwise Property Research, which is arguably Australia's most innovative independent research house, Doron has more than 20 years' experience in risk management, including time as an executive manager at Westpac. If you're looking for true independent, objective, and most importantly, forward-projecting research on every state, suburb and property in the country, then check out Riskwise Property at www.riskwiseproperty.com.au. That's riskwiseproperty.com.au. So, if you're an existing property owner, a potential property purchaser, or an existing or aspiring property investor wanting to know what to expect, what to do, and where to do it, you can't afford to miss this very insightful two-part series. In addition to reviewing what's happened in the world of property and finance over the last few years and the lessons that this teaches us, today we learn about the benefits of Riskwise's unique macro to micro property research approach, how you can acquire what he classifies as a AAA rated property, and what information you can and need to access so you can make better informed property decisions based on the future, not just the past. So enjoy this always informative straight shooting chat with Doron Peleg.
Welcome, freedom fighters. It's Bushy Martin back again. And at this time of the year and this time of the decade, it's always a good time to reflect on what's been happening, what have we learned from it, and more importantly, what's going to happen in the future. And I've found over the years that the best person who's going to give you not only really good independent and objective advice based on the future rather than looking in the rearview mirror, but also giving it to you straight. There's no vested interest here. It's just based on really good, quite scientific analysis of the situations. It's someone that you would have enjoyed in episode 24 of Get Invested, and it's Doron Peleg. So welcome back, Doron. Can't wait to have a chat.
Thank you so much, Bushy, for having me again.
Yeah, I've always loved talking to you, mate. As I say, you're one of the few people who really has turned the future of property into a science. And there's a lot of information out there that confuse people about what's happened in the past. But what I continue to love about you and Riskwise is the sort of future view of where that's happening and doing it in a very unbiased way. I find that there is a lot of data sources and a lot of so-called advisors in the property space that often have a vested interest in pointing you in a certain direction. What I continue to love and quite refreshing about yourself, mate, is the fact that it is totally objective, transparent, and really does give you something that's worth listening to rather than try to work out where the information's coming from. So really looking forward to our chat again today, mate.
Excellent.
Mate, tell me, it's been over 12 months now since we've had a chat on Get Invested, and I know that you're a man that really makes things happen. So tell us what's happened and what's changed with Riskwise over the last 12 to 18 months, mate.
Riskwise in the last 12 months has done really good because we were the first to call in mid 2018 the potential impact of the changes to negative gearing. So our independent reports got a lot of coverage by the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, and quite a few leading economists in Australia. It was very well published. So that really helped to drive the discussion regarding the negative gearing, the Labour policy, and it has a direct impact on the market. And later on, we also were in a very good position immediately after the election and the interest rate cut in June and the changes to the credit restrictions to come very early and to say that the market has shifted and the landscape is completely changing. So in that respect, we're doing well. We also have a larger number of clients, including lenders, developers, a good number of property professionals and consumers. So far we're doing well.
Yeah, mate, I'd love for you to share what you and I spoke about last week, and because the journey that we take our investors on in trying to identify where to invest in property has always been a macro to micro approach, and going from starting with spend, so that we work out what the affordable and achievable spend for an investor is, and then look at the highest gross location around the country to do that. So we start with state, then we go down to suburb, then we go down to street, and then we finally go down to property is the approach and the journey that we take our investors through. And I was really interested to hear about a similar approach that you're now adopting to allow people to back that up with a macro to micro approach on property research. Are you able to share that with us now, mate? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, as a concept, Riskwise is the only service that provides risk assessment and projected returns for individual properties, suburbs, or areas across Australia. Now, when you are an investor and you want to make the best decision that you can, or the informed decision, in plain English, you want to maximize the return, but to minimize the risk. Okay.
Yep.
So how do you do that? You just need to follow a very simple approach, which is called the journey or the investment journey. Yeah.
Yep.
The first thing that you need to do is to understand exactly your general objective. Yeah. What do you want to do? Do you want to buy a house for an owner occupier? Is it your first house? You want to upgrade? Do you want to invest? Is it your first investment or second? And generally speaking, is it your strategy is short term, long term, etc. And how much money you have?
Yeah.
And then you're saying, okay, based on that approach, let's say that I'm a property investor, and let's say my budget is between 500 to 600. I also have my own property. I have good equity, and hopefully, if things go well, I'm planning to hold this property for a long period of time.
Yep.
And in few years, hopefully, to have enough equity to buy one more property.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, okay, based on that elements, what can I do? And then you start at the high level, yeah. And the first question actually is, which is important one, am I focused in Australia? And my humble opinion is yes.
Yeah.
Unless you're very familiar with other markets, have any personal plans, just focus in Australia. Simple as that, yeah.
Yeah, let me add to that. Let me add to that as well, because this is a personal journey that we've been on, Doron, and we ended up jumping on a plane to go to the States and buy some property in the US after the GFC, thinking it was a lifetime opportunity, given that the market crashed pretty substantially. And while the properties have done well over there, it's been very challenging. And what we've come to realise is that once the properties return to their sort of historic levels, there's very little growth in the States. If you look right across the States, there's very little growth at all generally. And the other thing that we came to realise is that the level of professionalism here in Australia around property generally is far in excess of anything that we've experienced in the US. So I totally agree that I don't think there's any need to look beyond Australia when it comes to good long-term investment opportunities.
Yeah, in addition to the fact, and we'll talk about it a bit more when we drill down, but in addition to the strength of the property market in Australia, it's really hard to invest in a property that you do not know. And obviously, there are players in the market who have vested interest, right? So they come with very exotic proposals, right? Of a huge capital growth and rental return of something very innovative that no one heard of. That's fine. That's not your focus, okay? Yeah. Now, one of the key things when you go from the macro to the micro is to take control over the process, which means you make the decision and you move from the first level to the second and the third, etc.
Yeah.
And the second thing, don't let the background noises distract you, right? Because today we have, people have Facebook. And when I say people, is that because I personally, I don't use Facebook. It's a waste of time for me. Now, and what happens is that you think about an investment property and you start looking what's happening, and then there is something on Facebook that, an attractive investment property in Pakistan or whatever it is, or the US or Canada or Nigeria, whatever it is. It's just background noise that is not part of the plan.
Yeah.
And the only thing that we need to do is ignore. That's it. Now, and then you're saying, okay, I'm focusing in Australia, which means all the other things are completely irrelevant. That's it.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, okay, what can I do in Australia? And you start with the macro level, and you're saying, from a macro perspective, if I want to minimize the risk and to maximize the return, I need to avoid the adventures. I need to avoid uncertainty. I need to eliminate areas that have a bad reputation, or it's really, really hard to get growth. And obviously, the prime areas are mining towns and mining-oriented areas.
Yeah.
Let's think, for example, about Perth. Okay, some people wrongly thought that the market would reach the bottom. And I heard that from 2014 and 15 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 19. Yeah. And now maybe in 2020 it would reach the bottom.
Yeah.
But that is not the question. Even if it is, there are no growth drivers, and we'll talk about those in 5 minutes, to say, look, this is a really good market, and if I buy a property for 10 years, this is absolutely the best thing that I can do with $500,000. And this is a very important question. What is absolutely the best thing that I can do with $500,000?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then you're saying, okay, let's focus on the other states. Let's say, obviously Sydney or New South Wales, Melbourne, which is currently a very, very attractive destination for this price bracket. Some areas in Southeast Queensland and potentially some areas in South Australia.
Yeah.
And then basically what you are doing here, you are eliminating half of the states and territories in Australia. You're being left with very few.
Yeah.
And then the next level that you have, this is the regional area, or what we call professionally something that is called the SA4.
Yep.
Which means the area within the state. If we talk about Sydney, it could be Baulkham Hills and Hawkesbury, or the eastern suburbs, the inner west. In Melbourne, it could be the western suburbs, etc.
Yeah.
And then we're saying, okay, let's see now what we can do, because with $500,000 we cannot really buy a house in the northern beaches or the eastern suburbs of Sydney. Yeah.
No.
And let's see what potentially is or could be considered. And it's a very simple question. The first question is property type, and the answer is very, very clear and obvious, which is house. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, the reasons actually are few. So the first one, when you buy a house, you also buy a piece of land, which is very, very important, and you cannot create more land. In the past, the standard was, an acre, and then it was 1,000 meters, and then it was 500 to 600 square meters. And now in Sydney, in good areas, if you buy a house 350, 400 meters, in good areas in the northern beaches like Manly or the eastern suburbs, even a house on the 400 square meters sounds really good.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because of a very simple reason. There is not enough land in high demand areas. On the other end, regarding units, it's a matter of decision and planning. And we saw that with the unit oversupply. Obviously, it was not the right property type, but that was a very clear demonstration that through the right planning and decisions, you can create a huge number of properties.
Yeah.
And the second reason is that, and we saw that recently, is that generally units are by far more sensitive to investors' activity and to potential taxation changes. I mean, the negative gearing, obviously, as proposed by the Labour, the changes have a huge impact on units with all the mess that they create, because units have a larger concentration of investors. Okay, so as an investor, you actually, what you want to do is to buy properties that are suitable for owner-occupiers.
Totally.
Okay, you want to as an investor, you want to minimize your exposure to other investors. Okay?
Yeah.
I know that it sounds paradoxical, but that's how it works.
100%. We often say exactly that the one investment class that is driven very strongly by emotion property. And the reason for that is that in most areas, at least 70% of property owners are owner-occupiers, and they will spend more money than the property is worth just because they want it. What we need to be doing is slipstreaming quietly behind them and allowing them to drive the market, and we just go for the ride. So 100% agree with what you're saying there, mate. Spot on.
Exactly. Now, there is another key factor. In many cases, and we saw that in Sydney and also Melbourne, the functionality and proximity to work is a very important thing for owner-occupiers. Okay, so if we talk about the western suburbs of Melbourne, and we'll talk about it a bit more later. So what we're seeing here is an area that a few years ago started with the gentrification. It was kind of similar to the inner west.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had the inner suburbs of the west, like Footscray.
Yeah.
And people who did not have enough money to buy in the lucrative inner east of Melbourne had to buy in the inner west.
Yeah.
Why? Because proximity and jobs, and that's where they work, right?
Yeah.
And live. And what happens then? They live in Melbourne. And what happens then? You see additional number of people who buy there, and then the area went up significantly in prices. People moved out a bit more to Sunshine, and then Sunshine West, and then etc., etc. And this area is has very similar patterns to those that we've seen in the western suburbs of Sydney. Same thing, people have to move out. Okay?
Yeah.
So what happens is that right now you can buy roughly 20 minutes by train from Sydney CBD in areas like Hoppers Crossing, properties for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 on a relatively large piece of land.
Yep.
And this is a very important thing, because what drives this market? A lot of owner-occupiers. You see the movement from the inner east to the inner west, and then gradually to the outer west.
Okay, great.
So once we landed on a specific property type, which is houses, we started checking the areas that we can afford. And let's say that with the budget of $500 to $600, our budget is quite limited. So we don't have too many areas to consider, because Sydney is obviously quite expensive. We do have some areas in obviously Melbourne, South Australia, and Southeast Queensland. Then what we do, we start narrowing down. We're saying, okay, let's focus on these areas. And then we're saying, okay, let's say that the Gold Coast, or let's say the western suburbs of Adelaide, and let's say the western suburbs of Melbourne.
Yeah. We
drill down a bit more. And then we're saying, okay, which suburbs exactly we could potentially buy in? Now, and here, at a certain point of time, it really depends on your skills and understanding of the market. But at any point of time, when you work intrastate and you are not very experienced, what you need to do is to communicate with someone who is going to help you. The only question is when.
Yeah.
In some cases, it's the initial planning and research. In other cases, it's to help you to narrow down the selection and to execute the deal. In some cases, you roughly know what you're doing, but you need a buyer's agent or someone else to act on your behalf to purchase the property in the right price, because you're not familiar with the market.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, and this is the key thing, because the individual property itself has a huge impact on the price growth, and in plain English, on your equity in your future. If you buy the right property for the right price, and in plain English we call it a AAA property.
Yeah.
A property that on one hand ticks all the good boxes. Let's say that when we talk about houses, it's not only the suburb. We talk about 4 bedrooms, let's say 2 bathrooms, 2 car spaces, condition that is usually above average, good proximity to the specific facilities in the area.
Yep.
So these are the good things. We are avoiding the bad things. We are avoiding main road. We don't really care what the seller's agent is saying about main road. We do not want a property on the main road.
Yeah.
We do not want a property in close proximity to bars or restaurant when we can hear the noise in the middle of the night or early in the morning.
Yeah.
It's not for us.
Yeah.
We don't want any physical issues or any concerns that will reduce the demand for the property. And what do I mean by that? A good property simply attracts a larger number of buyers, a larger number of people who want the property, okay?
Yeah.
Now, if my property is on the main road, so half of the people, and again, we talk about owner-occupiers, yeah, and the missus is coming,
Yeah.
and she's saying, nope, too noisy. My kids are not going to live in this property. That's it. That's the end of the discussion, right?
Yeah. Spot on.
So what happens? You're losing a potential buyer. And as an investor, you want to rent this property out, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have the right property, it does not tick all the boxes. And 100 meters away, there is a similar property that ticks all the boxes. Let's say quiet street. And then what happens? The other property will enjoy the demand and your property will remain vacant for additional week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, and this is an important thing. You have a lot of relatively small things that when you put them on an aggregation, they have a major impact. Okay?
Yeah.
It means that instead of getting 500 a week, you're getting only a 440 or 450. And instead of having really good tenants that are happy with the property, not going anywhere for 2 or 3 years, your tenants are not really happy. It takes time to rent out the property. Every year or every 18 months, you need to find another tenant. Sometimes tenants do not want 12 months. They're not happy with the property. They use your property only as a temporary solution.
Yeah.
You don't want that to happen.
Yeah,
And obviously the capital growth is hugely impacted because if you have a property that ticks all the boxes, you have quite a few owner-occupiers. They want to compete for this property because they know that this is a really good property that ticks all the positive boxes and there's no negative element. So obviously they want to live there and to raise their kids there, right?
Yeah.
It's a very rational decision, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you need to do because this is a very crucial stage and it could cost you dozens or thousands of dollars at least if you make the wrong decision.
Yeah, exactly.
When we talk about houses and we talk about a period of 10 years or more, the impact between a good property to between a AAA property to a below average property could be in the 6 figures, which means that the impact could be $100,000 at least after 10 years, which is a substantial amount of money.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, totally agree, mate. It's as you've said, it's the accumulation there. It's no one thing. You need to be ticking the boxes from the macro right down to the micro to really optimise your reward, but minimise the risk at the same time. So love your thinking around that, mate. Love your thinking around that. So putting that together, if I was a investor and I'm looking for that to go on that journey and to support that journey with really good qualified information, how do they go about that with Riskwise, mate?
So look, what we have, we're very, very clear and simple tools. So the first tool that we have, and by the way, we provide with lenders, developers, and property professionals the same tool, okay?
Yeah.
Now, which means what one of the big four banks get, you also get. It's not that we give one thing to the lenders and another thing to the consumers. So the first level is we have a quarterly risks and opportunities report. This gives you a quarterly overview with risk and projections for the next couple of years for all the areas in Australia, all the states in Australia. This is a macro report. So this takes you to the state and capital cities level and says, yeah, that's basically what happens in each and every one of those, and it helps you to make a decision where you want to focus.
Yeah.
The second thing that we have reports within each state for all the areas within that state. Let's say that if you are in New South Wales, so we have reports for the Central Coast and Hunter Valley and Eastern Suburbs and Blacktown, Inner West, etc. Each and every one of the areas in Australia also gets a report, and obviously in all of our reports, not only we provide information, we also provide rating. And the rating is very, very clear. Traffic lights. Green is green light. Yellow or amber is you have to be careful. And red is don't go there. Okay, it's very, very simple to understand.
Yeah, brilliant.
And then what happens is that you have a variety of resources and areas that you can consider. Why is that? Because in many cases, people during the journey, they have additional ideas. They're saying, okay, let me check what else can I do in the in New South Wales, actually. Yes, so it's not really close to the city, but let's see what's happening in the central coast.
Yeah.
And with that tool, you can actually, with those reports, you can have, you can have a comparison in a sense that, yeah, let's have one report for the central coast in New South Wales, another one for the western suburbs in Sydney,
yeah,
another one for the western areas in Adelaide, and the fourth one for the Gold Coast, and the fifth one actually for Moreton Bay in southeast Queensland.
Yep.
Let's see how they work.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so it's a very effective tool because you have the entire set of areas. The only thing that you need to do is to review them and make a decision where you want to focus. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the next level that we have is a system generated report for suburbs or property, which means if you know the suburb, just go to the system, you enter the suburb details and a typical property that you would like to buy. Yeah. To see how it looks like. Let's say you go to Miami in the Gold Coast and you're saying, okay, I would like to buy, let's say, a house, and this is the configuration, and this is potentially the price that I would like to pay, how it looks like if I had bought that property, and let's also see how the suburb looks like and what is the rating of the suburb.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you know the address, you just need to enter the address, and then you also get the potential, not only risk, but also the potential AVM or the estimated price for this specific property. And you have the full picture, and then you see, yeah, am I on the right track or not?
Yeah, brilliant. It's I love your thinking. It's very intuitive. It's exactly the way that I personally and the people that we assist we go on exactly that same journey. So to have that level of qualitative and quantitative support with the data and the algorithms that go in behind what you're doing, just really going to help investors make much better informed decisions, Doron. So it's absolutely brilliant. So in the show notes, I'll provide details for those listening to be able to access your reports and how to become a subscriber to what you're doing to better inform not only in the buying of the property, but then keeping an eye on the area as it progresses, so that you can getting those updated quarterly and periodic reports on how things are progressing, mate. So absolutely fantastic, mate. We've sort of come towards the end of the year and the end of a decade, and we're about to broach on 2020. So always a good time to reflect. So given how active you've been in the marketplace, would love you to walk us through what's happened, particularly in the last 12 months, and there's been a lot happen in the property front across the country over that time. Would love you to walk us through that, and with a focus on what are the learnings and the insights that you've taken from that, and how will that apply to what we want to be doing in the future.
Okay, that's a good one and a big one. I'll tell you why. The recent 12 months, or effectively the last couple of years, were the most challenging in the Australian history as recorded, in the property market. Okay, why is that? Because we had a huge number of external events that I'll review quickly, that each and every one of them by itself has a huge impact on the property market. Okay, but the point is that there was a big number of events that happened in a very, very short period of time. How it works. We actually started with relatively strong or tighter credit restrictions in March 17. Okay, so that kind of set the tone. Yeah. And then what happened is that later on during 2018, lenders actually decided to apply voluntarily stricter credit restrictions. Yep. And then we had kind of a once in a lifetime Royal Commission with a huge impact on that. Yep. On top, and the recommendations that they had in scrutinizing of loan applications. Yep. And then we had also kind of almost once in a lifetime or twice in a lifetime potential changes to negative gearing. Now, if we take all of these in 2018, mid-18, yep. What we see is something very, very simple. Number one, the markets, especially in Sydney and Melbourne, and these markets draw all the attention. Later on, we'll talk about the other markets. Yeah. So they had a huge run till the end of 17. But what happens then? The market had reached the tipping point. But in addition to that, when you have the credit restrictions by APRA and the Royal Commission, you have a big problem. And then in the background, we have Labour. And the Labour were very, very vocal regarding the intentions to change the negative gearing. Now, the statistical probability, based on betting houses and the surveys, that they would win the election was around 82%. Okay? And they were extremely clear regarding the intentions to change negative gearing and capital gains tax and to allow it only for new properties, okay? Yeah. They had a certain idea, but theoretical idea, that it would only have a minor impact on the market of 2%, okay? So what we've done, we published a big report on that one, and based on our work, additional companies and policymakers quoted us. And then what happens? property investors saw that, there is a major problem with those potential changes. The election results could have a huge impact on the market.
Yeah.
So people said we have to factor that into our decision making.
Yes.
If the Labour win the elections, if they would win, it means that there would be a huge impact on property prices. Property prices would definitely go down. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, by the way, not only in Sydney and Melbourne, across the entire country, because the proposed changes to negative gearing were not limited to Sydney or Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
Which means they also were applicable to weak markets like Perth or Gladstone, Mackay, and many other areas in Australia, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we had. And then, over a very short period of time, between May to June 19, everything was kind of reversed. Labour lost the elections, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, the RBA cut interest rates and also implied in June that there could be more interest rate reductions.
Yeah.
Number three, APRA changed something that is called the floor assessment, or the buffer that they would like the banks to use to assess home loans. In plain English, they increased the borrowing capacity by roughly between 11 to 14%.
Yeah.
And all of this had a huge positive impact on the market sentiment.
Yeah.
And then what happens? People are re-entering the markets, and obviously the high and the top end of the market that suffered strong price reductions during the downturn is showing very strong price increases, and also other areas, especially in Sydney and Melbourne, are showing price increases. And if we take a look, so those obviously are the facts, but if we think about the lessons, so we have quite a few good lessons here. So the first one, and Bushy, this is one that we talked about, I don't know how many years, but quite a few years ago, before the downturn and the recovery. And so think long term and don't seek quick wins. Okay, so this is lesson number one. So that's fine. So we saw lending restrictions and Royal Commission and potential changes to Labour. Fine. But, and there is a big but, if you have the right property, which is a house, a piece of land, in the right location, the only thing that you need to do is wait. Why? Because even in the worst case scenario, where Labour would have won the elections and would have abolished negative gearing, after a couple of years, give or take, the market would have reached the same equilibrium point because of a very simple reason. There is a massive undersupply of houses in the inner, middle, and middle rings of Sydney and Melbourne. Simple as that. There are not enough houses. So the only thing that you need to do is wait. And with a huge population growth in those cities, obviously there is a huge demand for houses. Okay, so this is lesson number one. Okay, don't think about quick wins, because during that period we saw where people were looking for adventures in the mining towns, in Tasmania, in other places. So don't do it. Think long term.
Brilliant.
The second one is that, again, we said that we've been saying that for I don't know how many years. Units, and especially high-rise units, carry a higher level of risk to deliver either negative or very poor returns, okay, and not to deliver what you're expecting. In plain English, when you have $500,000, this is definitely not the best thing that you can do with your money. Okay, for any price point, instead of buying a high-rise unit, you can buy an established house, okay, in a different area. But fine, this is a well-established, it is an established and existing house that carries a lower level of risk for price reduction and would deliver better capital growth over the long term. So this is a key lesson, because we saw what happened, and based on the massive oversupply, there were also restrictions on foreign investors, and a lot of properties could not be sold. Okay, some developers became bankrupt, and on top of that, and that's a different topic, we now have the construction defect. Okay, and again, these are things that you don't see in a well-established house. You buy a house, it's a very simple structure. You have a house inspection. It checks what happens, the structure, the quality of the property, one property. Simple as that. After a couple of days, you get a report, green light, continue with the property. You don't care about cladding, potential changes, reputational damage. Yeah. So this is a big one. Okay, and let me explain about the reputational damage. What happens because of the construction defects? Many people don't want to buy in high-rise units because they say, look, I don't know what happens.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that. There are rumors that the problem is very broad, potentially across the entire country. We simply do not know. We don't have the financial means or the incentive to have an inspection for the entire building.
Yeah.
Okay, for us it's way easier and better to buy an existing house or a unit in a small unit block. Okay, so the high-rise unit is a big, a high-risk area. Okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Now, the other lesson, and again, we saw that in the past because many people were looking for some rental returns and positive cash flow, a lot of stories. Okay, in plain English, the cash flow is not the major consideration. Okay, obviously, if you cannot service the mortgage and you have problems with serviceability, you have to think about it. But if you do have the option, if you do have the means, so if you need out of your pocket to spend a couple of $100 a month, which are tax deductible, and to get a top property, a AAA property, which is a house, that's way better. In other words, capital growth should be the key driver for the investment decision rather than cash flow. Okay?
Totally.
And the last one is back to basics. Think about the simple things, as Bushy, as you like to say, houses, good proximity to jobs, high demand areas but by owner occupiers. Simple as that. You don't need to look for adventures or some creative things and deals, or what I like to call distractions and background noises. Just ignore them. Just keep it simple.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely spot on, mate. I often say, Doron, that good investing is the most boring thing that you'll ever do. And if you're getting excited by what you're investing in, you're probably not investing in the right thing. So, and if you want to do that, you might as well go to the races or go to the casino. So,
Now, look, if you want to donate donate money to the casino owners, that's fine. But exactly, look, an investment is a very structured process. And by the way, the approach that we have developed, the top-down approach, actually came from lenders. We came, number one, from financial services, and number two, we have clients that are lenders and investment funds, okay? And that's what they see, a very simple approach, top-down approach, okay?
I call it the 6 Ps.
Level.
It's I do a 6 S's in scarcity approach, which I talk about in my book, The Freedom Formula, which does exactly what you've just said. It goes from, we start with spend, because we need to work out what is the affordable and achievable spend, and then we look for the highest growth location around the country. So we go from spend, and then we synchronise that with the property clock. Then we go from state to suburb to street before we even get to the property. And all of those factors you've talked about help to drive that. And it's no rocket science. It's what do most Australians like to live in? A house on a block of land, 3 to 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a couple of living areas, and a couple of garages. There's no rocket science in any of this, but it's about being in the sweet spot of demand where everyone wants to be. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that the interesting thing in the residential property is that you have so many speculators in the market, with different vested interest, that they create so much noise. Okay, that's the first thing. And the second thing is that property investment look like a simple thing. Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to tell you, look, currently you have $500,000 and you need to invest in 10 different startups. Okay, each and every one of them could actually either fall or really, really succeed, and there is a company, and that's the process that they have. You're going to be very careful because of one simple reason. Most likely, you don't know how to invest in startup. You don't have any model to assess the risk associated with those companies, right?
Yeah.
With residential property, since it's a tangible thing, and many people think that they understand what they're doing, it's by far easier for property speculators and people who have vested interest to impact your decision, to create noise. Yeah, yes. They can invite you to a free event in a nice hotel with dinner and drinks and then speakers and whatever, just to give an update on the property market and to help you, because they like to help people, and they would like to bring, world peace. Fine. There is only one problem. That's fine. Someone pays for the event, right?
Yeah.
It's very simple, right? And if they brought speakers, so these speakers spend time, right? So someone paid them, right?
Yeah.
And if this someone is not you, you're not the client, okay?
Yeah.
It's a very simple thing, and from some reason, property investors like to think that they are more important than they really are. You're the client. If you want really top quality AAA property, you need to pay someone to help you. Simple as that. It's a very simple thing to do.
Yeah.
And I want to add another thing, which is also very interesting. At the high end of the market, we talk about Sydney eastern suburbs and the inner east. You have a lot of very successful executives and business people, and what they do, and they do it all the time, they simply pay to other people. I mean, for example, let's say that you are a high net worth individual, you've done well, and you would like to invest, let's say, 5% of your money in high risk companies, okay? A lot of people investing in those companies, the startup technology companies. So in many cases, what they do, they go to a venture capital fund. That's what they do, the fund.
Yeah.
And they tell them, look, we're going to put, let's say, 5% of the funds. It could be in many cases $500,000, in some cases more, $1 million in your fund. How does it work? So the fund says, we're really good in venture capital fund, and we take, 1.5 or 1.8 to 2% a year.
Yeah.
That's how they work.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. It's a very simple question, okay?
Yeah.
And there is billions of dollars in venture capital funds in Australia, okay?
Yeah.
So you do the math. So people happy to pay the 1.5 or 2%. The same thing for good superannuation and hedge funds and many asset classes, because people with money, also, let's call them a bit more sophisticated investors, know that in order to get the best results, you have to make the best decisions.
Yes.
That's it.
Simple.
And the decisions are made by more competent people, and those people cost money.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've always said that if you're going to be successful in anything, it's an elite team sport, and you're not a player. It's I often say if you were going to have brain surgery, you wouldn't go to Bunnings and buy a drill and some cotton wool and some methol and then try and do it in front of the mirror in the bathroom at home. You'd go and get the best neurosurgeon and anaesthetist and the whole team to get the best possible result. Well, it's no different in property. If you're not full-time into property, and you shouldn't be unless you're doing that, then surround yourself with a bunch of independent professionals who do what they say they're getting you to do. So, I'd never follow anyone who doesn't walk their own talk. But, I see ourselves as owners of an elite team, and I just make sure I've got the best players on the ground that understand each other's strategy and are kicking my goals, and then our only role is just to manage the managers.
It's a very simple thing, and I think that the other problem that, and we saw that in the lessons, that many investors are not fully aware of, is the consequences, in one word. And because they go to a certain event and someone tells them a story or whatever, or they make the decision by themselves, fine. And they buy somewhere in an area that usually they don't know, or they don't really understand the market, and they overpay a bit. And bottom line, after 5 years, what they see that they either lost money, dozens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars, or in other cases, they see absolutely zero growth. The market in Sydney and Melbourne was going up 30, 40, 50% in some areas. They saw 8% in 5 years.
Yeah, which is still pretty good, by the way.
Yeah. So obviously, this is something that we call regret, right? You regret of the result, right? So what I'm saying is that if you know that you could regret, try to avoid the situation. Try to do it differently. Yeah. So don't cut corners. Just do it right first time. That's it.
Yeah, I think the bit of the challenge there is that because people live in a house, they think they're experts on housing. So how hard can it be? I'll just go and buy another house. That's part of the thinking. The other thing is that a lot of Australians don't trust easily. So rather than trust someone else, they'll try and reinvent the wheel and do it themselves. And they just don't know what they don't know. So they get into hot water without even realising it's happening. So it's like anything, there's only about 5% of anyone who's successful in any particular area. To be amongst the 5%, you've got to play with the best of the best, and that's where I love what you bring to the table, Doron, with the objective forward projection side of Riskwise to help qualify those decisions.
Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. It's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get-invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.